I talk to lawyers in my day job all day long. This was a little bit of a busman's holiday for me because I think I've written about each of your cases along the way as you were litigating them. But I want to start with the filmmakers to talk a little bit, maybe Elyse you could start it off and the others could chime in, about how you decided, as I said, you had this journey from to this movie. Why this topic at this time?
Sure. So the story is that it was just as you've seen in the movie. It was 7 days after Trump was inaugurated that he enacted the Muslim ban. And on that night, I joined the protesters that were gathering on the steps of the Brooklyn courthouse. And I was just steps away from Lee when he emerged. I could see the expression on his face. I could see the exhilaration, the joy, and the total shock that he was suddenly in the center of crowds of people shouting ACLU. And I thought to myself, this is where the three of us needed to be for the next 3 years. We needed to be embedded with these guys, with the ACLU, because I felt like we were poised for one of the greatest, most significant civil rights battle of my lifetime. I felt like this was something that, a story that needed to be told. And, you know, my mother, who is watching, was a lawyer who fought for immigrant rights. So the stories are very familiar to me. Yeah.
It's funny, it was the day after the protest, Elyse came storming into the office. And she actually made a beeline. We have this whiteboard in our office of, you know, future projects and ideas for projects. She erased all of them and wrote "the fight" in big letters. And Eli and I were like, "What are you doing?" And then she said, "You know, we have to get into the ACLU and tell the story of fighting against Trump and fighting for civil rights." And Eli and I immediately we sort of realized in that moment, like, "Yep, that's exactly what we do." And off we went.
That's amazing, because you didn't actually know at that moment what the various ramifications or manifestations of the fight would be. You knew Lee was going to have his fight, and you could probably
I felt like for the next couple of years there was going to be an attack on civil liberties. And if in 7 days Trump was enacting the Muslim ban, what else was going to happen? And I felt like as storytellers, you know, let's get in there with our cameras, let's follow, let's see what we can tell. It just felt like a big story.
Can Eli, maybe you want to jump in here. What is it like? What is the challenge of getting in with your cameras? I mean, you guys got Anthony Weiner and Huma Abedin to let you into their home to film incredibly intimate scenes, but lawyers can be a little bit harder to work with also. How much time did you spend? Was it difficult to convince them to go along? And what was that day-to-day like?
Well, this is a great question, mostly for my partners, because they are sort of gifted diplomats and lovely to interact with. I tend to stay hidden away, and watching these guys, the ACLU. Well, I in fact I'm gonna kick that story to my partners, and whoever wants to take it. I'm least qualified to answer that.
We went to the ACLU. Lee actually introduced us to some other folks at the ACLU, and we sat down and we pitched them on the vision. Our style as verite doc filmmakers is, you know, we ask for and kind of need really total access. So we explain, you know, we want to be, you know, everywhere. We want to be with the lawyers in all the moments and strategy sessions behind the scenes, figuring out arguments, dealing with, you know, all the ups and downs of everything, including personal moments at home. And the folks we were talking to basically said, you know, that's a wonderful vision, and there's no way you'll ever be able to come into the ACLU and film like that. And so we considered that a good start to the conversation, and then continued it. And then it was many conversations later where, you know, after establishing a certain kind of trust in who we are as people and as filmmakers and our vision, And then also recognizing, I think, I mean, you guys, lawyers here can speak to this, obviously, but sort of recognizing just that this is a historical moment and that there's, you know, a need to capture this for history. I think there was some of that there too.
And lawyers, what was it like on your end? Dale, I thought one of the really amazing moments was watching you practice the night before your Supreme Court argument. And it was kind of as if by that point you had forgotten the cameras, or it was just so intimate.
Yeah, I think the filmmakers, I'm just so grateful to them. They did a great job of making us, I think, really comfortable with them. They actually followed me on a completely different case for almost a year before the census case. So I had just kind of gotten used to having Sean, the cinematographer, and Maya Seidler, who is one of the assistants on the film, like with me a lot. And so by the time it was the night before the Supreme Court argument, it was, you know, it was almost like they weren't there.
And for what were some of you more leery of this than others? I mean, you also have clients that you need to worry about, and your primary responsibility is to your clients. And if you've got cameras in there, you've got attorney-client privilege issues that you need to deal with as well, right?
That's right. And we were very careful about that and made sure that when we needed to kick the filmmakers out, we had no hesitation in doing that. So if we needed to have them leave, and I was obviously very concerned about protecting Jane Doe's privacy, and we set parameters for what that interview would look like. And, you know, we just really set those boundaries, and they were very respectful of those boundaries.
And what was it like for you guys when you saw yourselves finally on the screen there? Does somebody want to address that? Chase or Josh or anybody?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. It was a sort of very long process with so much footage captured, and so you sort of do have to see, you know, sort of have trust in what's going to come out on the other end. And I was very nervous to see the cut, and actually the first time I saw it was when we were prepping for the Supreme Court arguments in the Title VII cases, and I was so tired and in such a foul mood, but I was still really, Elyse was trying to feed me and give me water, but I think it actually, I think there was something, since I was working on a totally different case at the time, I was actually sort of amazed by the importance of capturing some of these things for historical memory, and felt like, wow, there were so many other moments I wish I could have on film. And so there was a sense that of real gratitude for what we were able to put out there by trusting them, and so much gratitude for them for how much they let us be ourselves. And so I felt, you know, very nervous, but then really grateful for what we were able to capture and what that will mean for sort of storytelling about legal movements going forward.
You know, I'm glad you used the word storytelling, because I would guess that from a filmmaker's perspective, this is a multiple challenge for storytelling. One is that you don't know how your story is going to end. So it's not like going back and looking at something. You're telling a story in real time. The second is the normal crux of legal drama is in a courtroom, but you can't have your cameras in the courtroom. And the third is that you're interweaving a number of stories all at once that are unfolding in real time. So how did you manage all of that? Because I thought it worked pretty well as I watched.
With great difficulty. It was not, I think we had the benefit of sort of a master team of editors. Kim Roberts and Greg Fenton edited the film along with me, and they have a you know, long history of bringing great giant stories to the screen. We also had the benefit of very compelling subjects doing very difficult things, and that is always, I think, gripping and something that we you know, we're grateful to as filmmakers, outside of our gratitude to them as citizens. But it was, I don't think the three of us have ever worked on anything this epic in scope, and I think weaving together those through lines was a real challenge, and titrating how much of an expert we want the audiences to become. And we didn't want to teach Latin to the audience, but I think that some of the details and some of the stratagem that these attorneys use, it's great to be able to see that from inside. So it was a long process of trying everything, and slowly refining the film into what you guys watched. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. It did. Was there a challenge that I missed in talking about your challenges?
Well, you know, one thing that was really lovely for us, we were intimidated by the fact that we were going to have to do courtroom scenes in places where we couldn't get cameras. But it's lovely for documentarians who are, you know, we're very run and gun usually. And to be able to, with animation, put the camera wherever we wanted, and just lean on the expressiveness of our attorneys' voices. I mean, they're all storytellers, which is incredibly helpful, and are sort of used to taking their audience of panels of judges and weaving their magic, and so that makes life easier. And then, you know, we can put a nice dramatic wide angle lens in exactly the spot we want on Brigitte's podium.
Yeah, it was, there are so many dramatic moments. Lee, I'm looking at you on my screen, and I think that it's, in some ways you have some of the most dramatic moments, and I hope you're going to take this the right way, some of the most comedic moments, because I felt your pain as you were running out of juice and looking for your phone and not quite knowing how to plug it in. And I thought you were very calm in the moment, actually. And yet at the same time, there was, you know, the client seeing her child reunited with her child, and that moment and the sound that she was making. And you could see it also in your own face at some of these moments. What has this been like for you?
Yeah, I've been doing this a long time, you know, more than 25 years now, and the Trump family separation practice is the worst thing that I've seen in my 25 plus years. And I would say probably that reunification of Michelle and her daughter may have been, in those 25 years, the most emotional scene that I have witnessed. Because I think it wasn't just that they were separated for 5 months, but being from a little village in the Congo and not having any understanding of what was going on, I don't think they really thought that they would ever see each other again. And when they came together, I mean, that was as raw emotion as I've ever seen. And, you know, and a lot of people are sort of asking, there's so much bad stuff going on in civil liberties and in immigration in particular, and sort of how do you keep going and how do the lawyers keep going? And you know, ultimately, I think everyone, all my colleagues will echo this, that it's ultimately those moments that keep you going. You see the clients themselves fighting so hard for their lives that it's really hard for us to let down. And then you have those moments where you actually once in a while win, and it rejuvenates you. And so, but the family separation practice is rough, you know, as rough as anything I've ever seen.
Do you know where they are now, your client and her daughter?
Yeah, so we know where they are. The unfortunate thing is that the government withheld the names of 1,500 children till very late in the litigation, only because there was an inspector general report that revealed it, 200 of those 1,500 being under 5. So we are still looking for hundreds and hundreds of children who are still separate. And because of the pandemic, we have been going door to door in Central America trying to find the families, and that slowed down. But I think that because there's so much going on, most people think, well, the family separation saga is over, but there's still little children who remain separated from their parents.
that's really sobering, and I want to figure out a way to segue to what was, from your point of view, I'm sure a good news week at the Supreme Court. Two really major surprises in the Title VII case, and then in the DACA case. Can you guys sort of in turns talk about your reaction to Chase and Josh, the Title VII case, and what you think it means, and then maybe Dale, you can talk about the DACA case.
I can start with the reaction, and then I'll have Josh say what he thinks it means. You know, we made so many strategic choices, and were so despairing at the time that cert was granted in those cases. And I started to lose hope over time, not because the time between the argument and the decision was indicative of anything really, but just watching things sort of continue to escalate with the anti-trans policies, particularly from the administration, and just feeling like, well, nothing good is ever going to happen. But the day before the decision came down, 15,000 people rallied in Brooklyn for Black trans lives, and that to me was an indication of the greatest amount of hope that we could have. If that many people are rallying in the streets, no matter what happens from the court, you know, we have the ability to move forward. And then to get that decision on Monday morning, even though I couldn't download it fast enough, even though I didn't know what was going on, even though Alito's 100-page dissent was cruel and vicious and so full of rage, that majority opinion was so incredibly clear and meaningful, and is going to have a huge impact, you know, for so many people, especially in light of all of the ways that the executive branch has tried to attack trans people. So it was incredible. I haven't really processed it yet, but I am so happy.
I would kind of wish you guys had your cameras rolling on that one.
We did too. Don't worry. I think, I don't know if you know, Josh sent me a text like, you think we can get in? I was like, we just submitted the film to Magnolia. There was like a whole chain about like, should we try now? I'm like, we can't. We just submitted. Sorry. So we were really, it was a real bummer not to be there, but we you know, we had to end the movie at some point.
So
I mean, at the same time, like there's been sort of nonstop attacks from this administration, you know, against trans people the Friday before the decision and like the same week of the decision. They've been filing a bunch of, you know, filings in other cases, just sort of gratuitously going out of their way to find a way to keep that decision as narrow as possible. And then, of course, you know, the 5 justices voted to allow the trans ban on the military to go into effect. So, you know, I think like we're fighting a rear guard action, and, you know, you can win some amazing like battles, you know, during a rear guard action, but like ultimately, you know, the best way to get the trans ban lifted is to change the administration, not to hope that Justice Roberts or Justice Gorsuch, you know, gives a 5th vote. So, you know, I think it's, you know, I mean, of course, when the decision came, I Chase all the time says the courts aren't going to save us. And I was like, well, maybe now and then, but it's still only like temporary.
Well, so can I ask a question about that? Why are you doing what you're doing if you think that the answer is the courts aren't going to save us?
It's you go, Chase. I think it's like we're the white blood cells that come to, you know, try to keep things stable for while, you know, the rest of democracy can, you know, recover. But, you know, another 4 years, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Dale, the scene of you trying to digest the census case in real time and figuring out that you actually won was a classic. What about the DACA decision? Were you?
I think I'll probably kick that question over to Lee since it's in the immigrants' rights arena. The one thing I will say about it is, you know, for those who aren't following it closely, that case was decided under the same law that the census case that I argued was decided under the Federal Administrative Procedure Act. And, I think, the common thread in both those cases was the Chief Justice calling the administration out for essentially dishonesty in its decision-making processes and unwillingness to be sort of forthcoming about why it's taking the actions that it's taking, which is really, at the end of the day, critical for political accountability. But Lee can talk about the significance of the impact, the decision.
Yeah, I mean, I was incredibly, I don't want to say surprising. I never like to sort of predict where the court's going to go, but I think there were a lot of people thinking that we wouldn't win. It's going to have enormous practical benefit, but on the other hand, the administration is already making noises about trying to rescind again. So I think this is one where we're just going to have to keep fighting. I don't know where it's all going to end up, but I do, just sort of picking up on what Josh was saying, I am one of those people that do believe that litigation can do a lot, but I think ultimately almost every civil rights lawyer will tell you that it has to be alongside public outcry and that the public has to be ready to change. I think that was critical in the family separation policy. I mean, we went into court and we got a huge victory, but it was surrounded by all of this public outcry on both sides of the aisle. And so for real civil rights change, I think, and lasting civil rights change, it needs that public support.
And Brigitte, I was waiting to ask you because while this was a week of surprising and gratifying wins, we have other cases coming down the road, including an abortion case.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about sort of your end of the fight?
Yeah, sure. So we're hoping good things come in threes, and we hope we get a good decision in June, Medical versus Russo, which is my colleague's case from the Center for Reproductive Rights, and it's a challenge to an abortion restriction in Louisiana, which would force all providers except for one to close. And it's very similar to a case that the Supreme Court decided in 2016, and it would be devastating if the Supreme Court rolled back the protections for reproductive rights. I don't think that they're going to overturn Roe versus Wade or anything in this case. That's not an issue in this case, but they could certainly weaken the standard that courts evaluate abortion restrictions, and they could take away one of our avenues to get into court to challenge these cases. So we are on pins and needles waiting for that decision.
So, Elyse, it's so interesting that you knew from the moment you saw Lee on the steps there and you went to your whiteboard that this movie was called The Fight. Probably when you know the title, you've got a good film to make on your hands. Do you guys feel, the lawyers, like you are winning this fight? In other words, are the courts, is the legal system withstanding adequately the relentless pressures that the Trump administration is putting on it? Or is it, I think Chase, you sort of talked about the prospect, maybe it was Josh, of 4 more years of this, but is the fight being won so far? Or is that just a way over rosy analysis?
I'm picking up on the thread about sort of the role of the courts in litigation and sort of what is the fight. And I think from my perspective, lawyering is a type of storytelling that can go alongside other types of movement, storytelling, and resistance. And I think if we look at everything together, that we have an opportunity in this moment to capitalize on momentum in and out of the courtroom. And so if we actually do that, if we look at the potential to, really change the discourse around policing and really change the ways in which we contend with and support trans lives and talk about immigrant justice, I think that we have the ability to keep fighting another day. And that to me is winning. And that is the optimism of this moment from my perspective.
And I think, when we set out to make this film, we wanted to make a film that was about hope and about, give a jolt of inspiration. We felt pretty down and depressed, and we wanted to spend our time with people that inspired us, people who made us feel good. And spending my time with you guys, it did that. I felt better. And then making the film, we wanted to share with all of you what a bit of hope, like what it looks like to fight back and sometimes to win. And right now, we need those positive stories of people protesting and showing that, yeah, the everyday guy, he can win, and it matters. So I feel like there was a big part of that in us wanting to make this movie.
It's interesting because you didn't necessarily know it was going to have a happy-ish ending when you started.
No, but it was such a, when Lee came out, it was such a David and Goliath moment. It felt like, wow, this ACLU organization just beat back the government for a minute. I wonder if they can do it again. And it felt like if we can have some of that, experience of watching these lawyers do that, we can share that sense of hope with everyone.